morning sun filtered through the bedroom window of the Thompson household in rural Montana, casting golden rays across what should have been an ordinary Tuesday morning. But what Sarah Thompson discovered when she opened her 18-month-old son's bedroom door would become a moment that changed everything she thought she knew about her family's 7 rescue dogs. Little Mason Thompson had always been different. From the moment he came home from the hospital, the family's pack of rescue dogs treated him not as a stranger, but as one of their own. What Sarah was about to witness, however, Sarah had woken up at 6:30, just like every other morning. Her husband David was already downstairs making coffee. The house was unusually quiet. Too quiet. Any parent knows that silence from a toddler's room is rarely a good sign. But this wasn't about mischief or danger. This was about something far more extraordinary. As Sarah approached Mason's room, she noticed the door was slightly ajar. She distinctly remembered closing it the night before. Her heart rate quickened, not from fear, but from curiosity mixed with maternal instinct. She gently pushed the door open wider, and what she saw made her freeze in the doorway, her hand flying to her mouth. There on Mason's small toddler bed were all 7 of their rescue dogs. Rex, the elderly German shepherd they'd adopted 5 years ago. Bella and Luna, the bonded pair of golden retrievers. Scout, the 3-legged Labrador mix. Pepper, the nervous border collie. Milo, the tiny Chihuahua with the biggest personality. And Rusty, the gentle giant Newfoundland, who was scared of his own shadow. But it wasn't just that the dogs were in the room. They were arranged in a perfect circle around Mason, each one pressed against the next, forming a living, breathing barrier of fur and loyalty around the sleeping toddler. Mason was nestled in the center, his tiny chest rising and falling peacefully, completely surrounded by protective canine warmth. Sarah stood motionless, afraid that any sound might break the magical scene before her. She slowly pulled out her phone, her hands trembling slightly, and began recording. She had no idea that this video would eventually be seen by over 40 million people worldwide. As she filmed, something remarkable happened. Mason's eyes fluttered open. He didn't cry or startle like most toddlers would upon waking surrounded by animals. Instead, he sat up slowly, and what happened next left Sarah speechless. The toddler, barely old enough to speak in full sentences, looked at each dog individually. He reached out his small hand and touched Rex's graying muzzle first. The old German shepherd's tail thumped softly against the bed. Then, Mason did something that made Sarah's eyes well up with tears. He began to check on each dog, one by one, with the careful deliberation of someone far older than his 18 months. Mason examined each animal. He touched Bella's paw gently, as if checking for injury. He ran his fingers through Luna's golden fur, smoothing down a matted section. He leaned forward and pressed his forehead against Scout's nose, lingering there for a moment in what looked like a gesture of profound connection. When he reached Pepper, the nervous border collie who rarely let anyone touch her except David, something extraordinary happened. Pepper, who would typically flinch and retreat from sudden movements, remained completely still as Mason placed both of his small hands on either side of her face. The toddler looked directly into the dog's eyes and made a soft, cooing sound. Pepper's entire body relaxed in a way Sarah had never seen before. Sarah continued filming, tears now streaming down her face. This wasn't just cute. This was something else entirely. This was genuine empathy and connection from a child barely out of infancy. Mason moved to Milo, the Chihuahua, who was shaking slightly as he always did. The tiny dog was known for being aggressive with everyone except David and Sarah, snapping at outstretched hands and growling at strangers. But as Mason picked him up with surprising gentleness for a toddler, Milo's shaking stopped. The little dog settled into Mason's lap, and the boy began to hum a tune that Sarah recognized as the lullaby she sang to him every night. By this point, Sarah was crying openly, but she kept the camera steady. She knew she was witnessing something special, something that deserved to be documented. But before we continue our story, let's pause for a moment and invite you to hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. All done? Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Your support is what helps our channel grow. Let's continue. Mason finally turned his attention to Rusty, the massive Newfoundland, who took up nearly half of the small toddler bed. Despite his size, Rusty was terrified of everything. Thunderstorms, vacuum cleaners, even the doorbell. The big dog was trembling slightly, which he often did in the mornings for reasons the vet could never quite explain. What Mason did next was the moment that would later be replayed millions of times on screens around the world. The tiny toddler stood up on the bed, wobbling slightly on the soft mattress, and wrapped his arms as far around Rusty's neck as they would go. He didn't squeeze or grab roughly like toddlers often do. Instead, he held the giant dog in what could only be described as a hug, a real, genuine, comforting embrace. And Rusty stopped shaking, completely. His large brown eyes, usually wide with anxiety, softened. His massive head lowered to rest gently on Mason's shoulder. The two of them stayed like that for nearly a minute, locked in an embrace that transcended species, age, and anything Sarah could logically explain. Sarah finally made a small sound, unable to contain her emotion any longer. Mason turned to look at his mother, and the smile that spread across his face was pure joy. He pointed to each dog in turn and said in his limited toddler vocabulary, my pack helped me." But it was what happened immediately after that truly shocked Sarah and would later shock millions of viewers online. Mason climbed down from the bed with careful precision, and Mason walked to his toy box, and the dogs formed a semicircle behind him, sitting without being commanded. The toddler pulled out 7 different toys, each one distinctly different from the others. And then he did something that no one could have predicted. He matched each toy to the right dog. Scout, the 3-legged Labrador, received the ball. It was his favorite, though Mason had never been told this. Bella and Luna, The bonded pair each received matching rope toys, which they loved to play tug-of-war with together. Pepper got the puzzle feeder that challenged her border collie mind. Milo received the squeaky toy he was obsessed with. Rex got the soft plush that he liked to carry around like a puppy, despite his advanced age. And Rusty received the large stick. Sarah's mind was racing. Mason couldn't have known which toy belonged to which dog. They'd never taught him that. The toys were kept mixed together in the box. Yet somehow, this 18-month-old child had perfectly matched each dog with their preferred item. By now, David had come upstairs to investigate why breakfast wasn't being made. He found his wife standing in the doorway of their son's room, filming on her phone, tears running down her face. When he looked past her and saw what was happening, he too stood in stunned silence. Mason was now sitting cross-legged on the floor, and each dog had approached him one by one to receive their toy directly from his hands. After each exchange, the dog would lick Mason's face once, as if in, "I don't know," Sarah replied, her voice barely audible. "I just discovered it this morning." "But David, look at how organized they are. Look at how he knows exactly what each one needs." Over the following weeks, the Thompsons began to pay closer attention to Mason's interactions with their pack of rescue dogs. What they discovered was that this morning wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern they'd simply never noticed before. Every evening, when the dogs would naturally settle down for the night in various spots around the house, Mason would have what appeared to be a bedtime routine with each one. He'd seek out each dog individually, spend a moment with them, and then move on to the next. The family had assumed he was just saying goodnight randomly, but after that morning, they realized he was checking on each member of his pack, ensuring they were settled and comfortable before he went to sleep himself. The video Sarah posted to social media that day exploded beyond anything the family could have imagined. Within 48 hours, it had been viewed over 5 million times. Comments flooded in from around the world. Animal behaviorists, child development experts, and dog trainers all weighed in with their theories about what they were witnessing. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a renowned animal behaviorist from the University of California, reached out to the family directly after studying hours of footage that Sarah and David provided. She explained that what they were seeing was extraordinarily rare, but not impossible. Mason had somehow developed what she called pack awareness at an age when most children are still learning basic cause and effect. What makes this so remarkable, Dr. Rodriguez explained to the family during a video call, is that Mason isn't just interacting with the dogs. He's reading their emotional states and responding appropriately. That level of emotional intelligence in such a young child is extraordinary. Combined with the dog's obvious acceptance of him as part of their pack structure, you have a truly unique situation. The media attention was overwhelming at first. News outlets from across the country wanted to interview the family. But Sarah and David were protective of Mason's privacy and selective about what they shared. They wanted to make sure that the focus remained on the beautiful relationship between their son and their rescue dogs. not on exploiting either for fame. What the world didn't see in that original viral video were the quieter moments. The way Rex, who was battling arthritis in his hips, would position himself next to Mason's high chair at every meal, and how Mason had learned to drop small pieces of his food directly to the elderly dog without being asked. The way Pepper, whose anxiety had been so severe when they first adopted her, that she couldn't be in the same room with strangers, would now sleep at the foot of Mason's bed every single night, her nervousness calmed by the toddler's presence. They didn't see the afternoon when Scout, despite having only 3 legs, had limped to the back door and barked persistently until Sarah followed him. Scout led her to the far corner of the yard, where Mason had wandered off and gotten stuck behind a piece of fallen fence. Or the morning when Milo, the tiny Chihuahua with the aggressive reputation, had planted himself at the top of the stairs and refused to let anyone pass, because Mason had somehow opened a window in his room, and the tiny dog knew the toddler needed protection from the dangerous opening. The relationship between Mason and the 7 rescue dogs became a case study in the remarkable bonds that can form between humans and animals when given the right circumstances. Dr. Rodriguez published a paper on the family, with their permission, that was featured in several prestigious journals. But for the Thompson family, the science and the media attention was secondary to something much simpler and more profound. They had rescued 7 dogs over the years, each one with their own trauma, their own fears, their own special needs. They had given these animals a home, love, and safety. What they hadn't anticipated was that these 7 dogs would, in turn, raise their son in ways they never could have imagined. Mason, now approaching his 2nd birthday, continued to amaze everyone who met him. His ability to read emotional cues wasn't limited to dogs. He was remarkably intuitive with people as well, seeming to know when someone was sad or upset and offering comfort in his own toddler way. The morning Sarah discovered Mason sleeping with all 7 dogs had been 6 months ago now. The video had been viewed over 40 million times. People from around the world sent messages sharing their own stories of the bonds between children and animals. Some shared photos of their own kids sleeping with their pets. Others talked about how the video had inspired them to adopt rescue animals. But perhaps the most touching outcome was the number of people who said the video had reminded them of the importance of teaching children empathy, compassion, and respect for all living things. Teachers reached out, saying they were using the video in their classrooms to talk about kindness. Therapists mentioned using it with patients who were struggling with anxiety, showing how for Sarah and David, the most rewarding part wasn't the viral fame or the media attention. It was watching their son grow up surrounded by unconditional love from 7 rescue dogs who had found their forever home. It was knowing that Mason was learning lessons about loyalty, empathy, protection, and love that would shape who he became as he grew older. The 7 dogs, each rescued from difficult circumstances, had found more than just a home with the Thompsons. They had found purpose. They had become guardians, teachers, and family to a little boy who saw them not as pets, but as equals, as his pack. And Mason, he had learned, before he could even speak in full sentences, that love transcends species. The Thompson house in rural Montana might have looked ordinary from the outside, but inside, something extraordinary was happening every single day. A toddler and 7 rescue dogs had formed a bond that reminded the world of something important: that compassion, empathy, and love are not learned from textbooks. Or if you found this story touching and want to see more heartwarming content like this, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. We'd love to hear your own stories about the special bonds between children and animals, so please share them in the comments below. Your story might just be featured in our next video. Thank you for watching, and remember, sometimes the most incredible teachers in life have 4 legs and a wagging tail.